gonna try not to do a Chris Farley up here. You guys rule. Love you guys. All right. So first, Mike Fitzgerald is a former morning show, or actually did a little bit of afternoon too, or drive time in morning show.
I've done every shift, all nights too. So I've done every shift in radio. Yeah.
So a former award-winning DJ on CBS FM and WHN
in New York. Yeah.
Was that
How'd
around
you
when?
find all that stuff out?
I got my sources.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I actually grew up listening to you. My dad was a big fan of those stations, and I used to listen to the Mets all the time. And WHN had the Mets.
That's what it was, yeah.
He's made games, he made a ton of great games. And I'm sure I've missed some, and so apologies to Mr. Fitzgerald first.
I forgot half of them, so I'm not much help there.
So we've got games like Baseball Highlights 2045, Diamonds, great game, it just came out this past year, Mystery Rummy Series, Sloop, Banana Slit, Wyatt Earp, the X-Men trading card game, a ton of trading cards, the WCW Nitro trading card game, Wyvern, Lord of the Rings Tarot deck card game, Dragon Hunt, and pretty much you put every deck of Pokemon together.
Every PCD. Well, it's a funny story. There's only two people who have done this, and I didn't know this till Essen. I'm standing there talking to Mike Elliott. You all know who Mike Elliott is, right? Great designer with Thunderstone and all that stuff. But Mike was a kid when I was at Wizard of the Coast in 1995 or 6 when they hired me to do Nitro. I had already done Wyvern, and they brought me on to do some trading card games, and Mike was on my development team. At that time, he was doing the pre-constructed decks for Pokemon. So at some point when Hasbro took over and Pokemon decided to not be distributed by WotC, they started doing it at Pokemon USA, and I took over just that part of the job, doing the pre-constructed deck. So Mike Elliott and myself are the only two people who have ever made a Pokemon pre-constructed deck. Thank you very much.
Have you caught them all yet?
I've tried very hard to catch them all, yes.
Richard Launius, one of my favorite game designers. Alien Uprising, Run, Fight, or Die, Draco Magi, Defenders of the Realm, Till Dawn, Pirates vs. Dinosaurs, Ace Detective, Elder Sign, Dragon Rampage, Sentinels of the Multiverse, a couple expansions in there, which were awesome. It's a part of Rook City and Infernal Relics, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Arkham Horror, of course, Arkham Horror, and Defenders of the Realm Battlefields, which I like quite a bit.
I love that little the card game. Yes. I love that one. Yeah.
So Richard Launius, everybody.
Hello.
All right, so since we've got a bunch of designers in here, can you guys talk about, you guys have been in the design industry for decades. Now, can you tell us how your approach to design has changed over the decades as the industry has changed a bit?
You want to go ahead? You go ahead.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, I designed my first game because of one game. And I'm sure there's probably more than one of us in this room that started to think about being a game designer. If you're anywhere near as old as I am, I don't know how many of you are. But Magic the Gathering, when I started playing that game, I realized, oh, holy cow, this, there's a game here. There's a world here. There's just so much fun and different play every time. And before that, I was a playtester for Avalon Hill, so I was playing, war games and stuff, and they were nice, but usually they were set historically, and sort of things were happening the way you might expect them to happen, and they were, real brain burners, fun. And I was a chess player as a kid, but when I saw Magic the Gathering, I realized, wow, how did he do this? So I reverse engineered the math on it. It's not too hard to do, although when I later worked for them, I showed my notes to Richard Garfield, and I was wrong in several spots. Well, no, this isn't how we did this, but it was a good attempt. And then I reversed the way the game goes. Magic is a resource building. I did a collapsible game in Wyvern, where you start with everything and you try to hang on. I figured it'd be nice to try something different, and I had no idea it would be successful or not. Little did I know that at that point, if you were one of the first 4 or 5 trading card games, you were making money, good or bad, because everybody was buying it. The stores, everybody ordered it. And so it did very well for a little over a year. I think it was a little simple probably for the time. And there were so many games coming out. There was the glut, and then it all sort of slowed down a lot. But I did that first game as sort of an exercise saying, wow, there's so much here. I wonder how they went about it, right? So I did it. Then they contact me and say, well, we really like the way you did that because you didn't copy Magic. Other people, Ultimate Combat was an exact ripoff of Magic the Gathering. They just put different names on the cards for this. What was it? It was like was it wrestling or fight? I even forget the theme of it, but it's martial arts. That's what it was, martial arts. And the same cards, just a different thing. The only other original idea was Steve Jackson at the time with Illuminati. So he and I have talked a lot how we sort of stepped out of the box a little bit in trying it in different ways. Most of the other games coming out at the time were the same. So Wizard of the Coast hired me not to do trading card games for other companies. I said, you can't. We're going to pay you not to do them for other companies. You can still do any other kind of game you want. and then we're going to pay you again when you come up with a game or we tell you to do a game. So they told me to do Nitro, they told me to do X-Men, they actually did a Spider-Man, and then they didn't have the contract by the time it came out. And I was involved in Harry Potter. They took my Nitro mechanic and did some stuff with Harry Potter. So I did a lot of work with them, which was very exciting and satisfying. But I was so immersed in trading card games. So for me, early on, it was how to do trading card games. I worked hard at it, so I think I got okay at it. I could do them in pretty quick time. They're an unusual kind of game. It's not like what we do now, right? You're working on a set formula, and you have to come up with something that engages whatever theme it is and will play quickly. Had a lot of restraints on how you do it. So I went off and did my Mystery Rummy series. That was a little different. That was the first big change for me. It was like, okay, I loved Clue as a kid, and I loved Rummy, and I wanted to see what I could do with a Rummy mechanic and maybe introduce some theme to it. So I worked on Jack the Ripper for like 3 years and got U.S. Games to publish it, and then it did well, so they came back for more, and I started doing more of those. So as time goes on, I've approached the design now as what do I want to do, mixed in with the companies telling me what to do. That's much less now. The last one I did where a company told me to do it was Huya, the Navy SEALs card game. The day after bin Laden was killed, Stuart Kaplan called me from U.S. Games and said, we want to do a family Navy SEALs card game. And you have to have the mission in it where he's killed. I said, okay. So I tried. I came as close as I could. Missed the hobby market because it's not gritty and detailed enough. Missed the mass market because of the theme. But it's just selling somewhere at military bases, I think, and at some places. But I'm much more connected with the games that I do, like this one, from a personal passion. So I start with theme, and then I usually have a bunch of mechanics I'm thinking about. But it has changed. At first, it was sort of what can I do with a trading card game? To now, what's got me juiced and excited to try to do a game in. And then if I can offer something that I think is unique enough, and of course, any designer will tell you whether or not everyone else likes it or not, we have no idea. We put it out there and you hope. It's nice when it happens. But a lot of the games I just want to see published. This was very important for me to see published. Beyond that, I'm very excited the reception is good, but I was so passionate about this, I just wanted to see it to come out. So, yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. Now I try to start with a theme or an interesting idea that I want to do and go from there.
I guess I've approached it a little bit differently from the fact that I've really never worked for a game company, so I never had anybody telling me what to do. So all mine always start with just something I want to do and something I want to play. And it always starts with theme for me. That's always the heart of it. I heard him mention the word math. I don't really do math. Those of you who play my games probably know that. But I actually just design the game the way it should feel. It's more of an art than a science for me. And then I tweak the game as it goes along until I've got something that I think is really, really fun. And, I make very few formal presentations to companies. I'll just break out my game like we're doing here, and usually somebody says, hey, I want that game, which is nice. But I predominantly design games, around something that I would really love to see a game around, and it's always around theme. Like, I didn't know you did Hoorah, to be honest with you, but I love that game, by the way, okay? And if you haven't played it, it is really simple mechanics, but the game is in the theme, because you can actually, if you play with other players, feel the theme. And to me, that's what a game has to do. It has to live up to its theme. And I know that I'll be around and probably get to play some of your games, and what you're going to hear from me over and over again, does this go with the theme? And if it doesn't go with the theme, for me, it kind of loses points, and you need to think about how you make that theme come alive. And some mechanics work better with theme than other mechanics, but a lot of times you can mix mechanics a lot of different ways, but really the theme has to come through, I think, when you're designing a game. And if you do that, a game's going to be fun, and people are going to want to play the game, and then I think publishers are going to want to publish the game. And like he said, you always want the public to want your games. Who doesn't want the public to want their game? You make more money if you do, but to be honest with you, I'm with him. When I design a game that I really, really like, I just hope it gets shared with other people, and it'll find its audience or it won't find its audience. And I learned that real quick with Arkham Horror. When Arkham Horror first came out with Fantasy Flight, which was second publication, The first year it was out, there were 40 negative reviews on BGG and 40 positive reviews. And the people that didn't like it, they really didn't like it, okay? And the people that liked it, they really, really loved it. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for a game to find its audience. We have a lot of people who like a lot of different style games. I'm not sure there's such a thing as, especially if a game gets published, I'm not sure there's such a thing as a really bad game unless it's just unplayable. But there's how big is its audience? That's really what it comes down to. How many people like this kind of game and get exposed to it?
So let's talk about your first published games. How many iterations, or I'm sure that you didn't just sit down one day and Arkham was just born and that was it. Or like how many iterations, or how long when you were a rookie designer?
Okay, well, now, first of all, when I designed Arkham, I slipped into Arkham by doing some role-playing stories first. I was published a couple times in Different Worlds magazine. I submitted some stuff to Fantasy Flight that got included. Not Fantasy Flight, excuse me, to Chaosium that got included in Call of Cthulhu. And then I really just loved the whole idea of having a board game and not having a role-playing game that needed a keeper or a game master. So I came up with the idea of, I'm going to create a board game. And at that time, my wife was working night shift. I was working day shift. We had 2 small children, so I would come home, she would go to work, and after I put the kids to bed, I could design. And so I started designing the game. I drew up the board first. I started making the cards. Back then, by the way, this is how old I am, all cards typed on a typewriter. Okay, everything that was drawn was hand drawn. Okay, and when I got it done, I adjusted it, I fooled with it, and this probably went on for 6, 7, 8 months. And then it kind of, and I'm talking the first edition one, if you've played the first edition one, which, nostalgically now you look back at it and go, boy, that's not near as good as the second one. But for its time, it had a lot of things going on for it. Even now, there's still a lot of pieces of it I really enjoy when I break it out. But we played it with our friends. Everybody was loving it. Everybody kept saying, you need to send this off to Chaosium and, get it published and whatever. And I didn't want to do it because I couldn't remake it. Okay, all the cards, there just was no way to mass produce something like that. But ultimately, I did. Didn't hear anything from them for about 3 months. I figured it was just thrown away or whatever. And finally, Greg Stafford called me, who was the president of Chaosium, one day, and he said, look, I've got to publish this game because it's all the playtesters want to play. That's all they do is they go home and they play it. They come back the next day, they play it. And the original version of Arkham Horror, a lot of people don't know this, but the original one I did that was published back in the 80s, there was no end to the game. You just played, scored points, and that was the end of the game. So you could just play it nonstop forever. It just kept going on and on and on. So finally we were like, they came up with the idea of, he's got all these gates. Let's have him shut down so many, and then you can ultimately end the game. So we put that in ultimately. But that's kind of my experience of how I got into the first design.
Nowadays, of course, what is it? The first question, Richard, or the second is how long does it take to play your game?
Yeah.
And if you say like 90 minutes, they say that's an hour too long, and they'll say you start that. But that's fantastic. Just say, no, you can play as long as you want.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter. Every game has its own life, right? I mean, I'm sure those of you designing games know that. I've had some games where they just happen, maybe the shortest, maybe a month. And at the end of that month, I said to myself, I don't know what else to do with it, and you test and it seems to work, and I'm almost scared, well, there must be something wrong. It only took me a month. And others would take me years. So, my first one, Wyvern, it was, as I said, a little bit of a math exercise because I was trying to figure out how to do a trading card game. So not that I'm into math, but I had to, you have to be for those cost curves and all that. But the elements of the game, I took Stratego. And as Mark Justice was our first world champion and a top Magic player in the mid-'90s, said that Wyvern is Stratego with giant growth. And he's absolutely right. And he thought, maybe I wouldn't appreciate that comment. I said, no, that's exactly what it is. I did Stratego where you're attacking face-down cards. There's an interaction, and you have cards from your hand that can change the strength of your dragons and stuff. So exactly what it is. So that was maybe 6 months from the start to the finish. The current game I'm showing here tomorrow is on its 8th version. And why I say a version means I went through printing up the tiles, and this is not a card game, by the way. It's my first game that's really not card-driven at all. So it's tiles and stuff and bits, and there's so much you have to do when you're redoing the version. You make one basic change, and it's like the whole thing, has to be rebuilt from the bottom up. But each version, I think, is working better, and I think it's finally coming together. But it can take, this one, I started designing this one the week Dominion came out. Now, how long is that? I mean, I can't even tell you how long I've worked on this. Seems like a fairly long time ago. Because right away I said, wow, this is it. This is what I could do a sports game on with baseball. This idea you can get your players somehow. So my first version was just a lineup of players you were buying, and then you would get your hand and you'd lay out your players, and they'd each have runs on them, and whoever had the most runs won the game. So you could play with 4 people, 5 people, and you'd have a game against each person. Now, actually some people really liked it, but it was just it was just exactly like Dominion. I said, well, that's not what I want to do, right? So the hard part of this all these years was, how do you get the feel of a complete baseball game with every possible baseball score? That was something I would not give up. Every possible score from 1-0 to 12 to 11 to 13-0 is possible in playing 6 cards per player. How do you do that? And I had no answer for a long time, but I said I will not even take this game to the next level till I figure that out. And it involves both players having mats, so you have men on base at the same time, and there's offense and defense going on at the same time, and the big step was it involves multiple hits on the player's card. So you have to sort of figure, okay, this is what they're doing over a whole game, So you have to have all these things happening and all kinds of rock, paper, scissors-y kind of stuff to be able to get all the different outcomes. But so that took me, several years. Diamonds, one of my fastest designs ever. The first version was a month. It was just a little too complex, and I say another month for cleaning that up, and it was ready to go. So, yeah, you just never know.
Now, let me ask you guys about growth through failure. We've heard a lot of designers that talk about, or people that want to talk about design, saying you have to have the courage to just scrap a design and just walk away. Have you guys ever done that and has it ever really hurt you to scrap a design and then?
First of all, it doesn't take courage to scrap a design, okay? It just takes common sense. There comes a point when you made a lot of changes and the game's just not working. I've got a closet, I call it the closet of misfit games, and there's just stacks of them in there. But every now and then you'll go and pull one back out and say, I got it now, okay? And maybe you will. I mean, every game design has its own life based upon how well that initial concept comes across when you first put it down. Okay, sometimes it's like, over here where you're talking about, okay, I can keep going toward this and ultimately get there. And sometimes it's just like, it's just not going to happen. I had one game, literally, I redesigned it, 5 different times before I got it to a game that was actually fun to play. All right, I'm like, and I used every different kind of mechanics that there was, and then there's other games that they still set on my shelf, and I may have done 1, 2, 3 different versions of it, and it's still sitting there, and may or may not ever come back out again. And then there's other games like you was talking about Elder Sign. I designed Elder Sign in 1 week. I mean, that was it. That was what I showed him in 1 week. Really, there's not outside of Kevin did a great job of balancing and bringing a lot to the game, but basically I designed the game in a week, and that includes the actual building of the prototype, and the game is as the game is. And, so it really just depends on how good that initial idea you have comes out right at the very beginning. And if it comes out really great, then you're dealing with, okay, how do I make it better? But if it doesn't come out great, you've got to be willing to throw away your initial concept. I hear people sometimes say, well, this is the core mechanic, so I can't change from that. Well, if it's not working, it can't be the core mechanic, okay? You have to be able to throw that out. And I've had playtesters give me feedback at times because I'll change a rule right in the middle of playtest. I say, okay, that rule's out. We're doing this now. What? Wait. And then all of a sudden it'll start working. And they're like, how does that happen? It's because you know that game, and you need to know that game. That feedback's important, but in the end, it's your concept that you've got to make sure stays on target.
My playtesters keep saying I'm doing that only so I win the game, the playtest. And of course, that has nothing to do with it, but that usually happens. But anyway, all I'll say, and he's absolutely right. You have a closet full of the stuff that didn't work, and if you can sense, right? It's just I'm beating my head against a wall, and there's no movement. You can't see the fun yet. I got to see the fun. I got to say, okay, I'm having fun with this part of it. Now I got to build around it, but don't throw them out, because I've had the experience where, like Richard was saying, sometimes it'll hit you. Wait a minute, now maybe that's the way I should. You're working on something else, and you'll say, oh, I solved that problem. That was back in that game. And then, so it's helpful to have them around. But yes, you've got to be able to say, man, this sucks. And, you've got to have playtesters and friends, too, who will tell you. You can get sort of in the forest and close to the design and be so biased. And they don't, some playtesters, if you're so enthusiastic about something, they don't want to tell you. But I watch them closely, because usually if they're not going to say it, you can see it in how they play, right? They're not having a good time. They're not. But if they are getting excited about a certain thing, even more than what they say, clue into their reaction to those things.
Right, and also know your play testers. They always will try to change the game to what they like most. So know what they like most, because they may not be giving you the best feedback. They're telling you what they want the game to do for them. So you have to always balance that against, what is the game ultimately going to do. And the key to it is it has to have this fun element. Okay, now, you can always say, well, what is fun? Different people probably view that different ways, but in the end, people sitting down and playing the game are having a good time. If I ever get a lackluster review from a reviewer, but they say, I don't know how to rate this game. I mean, it was fun, but there wasn't any new mechanics or whatever. I'm like, you got it. It was fun. That's it. You stop right there. I'm happy. I don't care what you say beyond that point, because that's the kind of game I'm trying to make.
So now you kind of mentioned the Closet of Misfit games, and you mentioned
I have more than one Closet of Misfit games.
And you also mentioned kind of coming up with other things. Have you ever gotten to like writers, designer's block or something? Do you just throw it in a closet, or do you have a few other exercises or things that you would do to try and get past something that you just know there's something you're missing or something you want to add to it or something's not working, and instead of just kind of walking away, do you have like somebody that you go to or just your group that you just kind of keep hammering at it? How do you approach blocks at times?
Well, I usually take a break from the game. Like if I get too close to it and I'm just day after day, I'm really trying to solve something, it's not working, I'll say I got to just put this aside for a while. Now what I'll usually do is I won't run right away to work on something else. I will usually play some of my favorite games. I'll make sure that next week I'm playing a lot of really what I consider to be fantastic games I love playing. Because the more I play, the more that frees up, for some reason in me, it just gets the juices going again, and I sort of tune into what I'm really looking for, which is something like that experience, So that's what I do. I just take a little break and come back.
Yeah, for me, I don't really take a break. I usually have multiple projects working at the same time. So I'll set it aside for a while. I'll work on one of the others. I usually have 3 to 4 game designs in flight, and I probably got 15 to 20 notes on games that just sit there that someday when I get enough time, I want to go do this, okay? So I'm not looking for things to do. So I'll go and work on those for a while, and sometimes that'll trigger the response. Wait a minute, working on this tells me what to do over there. But if I go for a week or so and I've made multiple changes to the game and it's still not working, then it goes on the shelf and it'll come back out when I see something I can do with it.
Now, this is kind of a fanboy question, but nowadays, now that you guys are so popular and so good at your craft, does anybody tell you no when you bring them a game?
Oh yeah.
So still to this day, you get.
But first of all, not a lot. But here's the thing for me. I usually won't present a game to somebody that I don't think is in their line. So first of all, I'm not going to be running all my games to Rio Grande. They're not interested. Okay. I'm going to have to stick with companies that want to do thematic adventure, don't have problems with dice, don't have problems with long games. Even though I'm crafting some shorter games these days, that's still going to be my primary audience because that's the kind of games I make. So I'm going to go to them. But just because you have a game that's good doesn't mean it's one that they think they can make money on. I've got a spy game. I mean, Z-Man absolutely wanted it, and then then they backed off of it simply because it was a deck building game with about 15 custom dice, and they just didn't feel like they could ever make that work for them financially because of the art. So you can still create monsters that people don't want. You also can create things that people want, but they may not be able to do it in whatever their timeline is, for example. I mean, okay, I designed Elder Sign very quickly, and it was a done deal, and Fantasy Flight was very interested, but Christopher called me on the phone and said, Richard, I can't publish that game for 2 years. So it's going to be 2 years before we're publishing that game. Is that okay with you? Yeah, it's fine with me. Because I know the quality job you're going to do, so absolutely it's fine with me. But, you run into that type of situation, but at least I don't think I get a free pass. You may get a free pass. I'm not sure.
I don't get a free pass, but I'll tell you what concerns me a little bit is there are companies that will just say, Mike, just give us something.
Yeah, and I've had that.
And I will put it right out. And I say to myself, that doesn't make me comfortable because, we don't want to put out something that's not good. And so I think certain companies will think, well, it's got to be like all the other good stuff they've done, right? Well, both of us have probably done games that are not that great or as good as others, and our closet is obviously full of stuff that we didn't think was good enough. So, but the trick is you get better at who to go to with the game. Now, when I did this game, I knew the hard part of this would be finding somebody to do it, because these companies, now we're always thinking out of the box, coming up with a fun game, right? And it isn't on the top of my mind, and maybe it should be more, is components and what, will the game be what everybody's expecting a game to be? And I don't really think that way. I'm trying to think of something interesting that's just going to be fun. So when but I knew the theme would be a problem. And then, so I go to, and, he's told the story, Stephen from Stronghold Games, who loved this game. We sat there, he wouldn't stop playing it. Let's keep playing. Let's go something. Ooh, this is a good sign, right? But he's saying, Mike, this is great, but I can't do this. So it's a sports game. They don't sell. It's 2 players. That never sells. So it's like, okay, I guess, that's not going to happen. Now, so I had to keep going and keep looking. And at the time was Sean Brown with Eagle Griffin, who, again, is a big baseball fan, so he loved it. And he just called Rick Seward up right away and said, oh, my God, this is it, because Rick's a big baseball fan. And, of course, at the time, Ralph, my lifelong friend and playtester and helped me on Mystery Rummies for 20 years, Ralph's helped me with games. He ends up working for them. So this was like the perfect marriage, as it turned out. But yeah, and sure, I've been turned down, but I'll say, since I'm pretty selective on who I go to, I'm trying to think. It's been a while. I mean, it's been a while since somebody said no to a game that I'll bring, or that I'll say, now I got it. But there's a lot of games I won't bring, right? And I'll just sort of wait till I find the right.
I think that's the real difference. We don't show a game that we don't think they will want to publish.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's probably the key to it right there, for the most part.
Now let's, Richard, in the last few years, you've had a few collaborations that you've helped out on, Draco Magi being one of them. Now, can you talk about how does something like that come about? Do you just see something, or you see somebody designing something, you say, I could make this, I could help you out with this, or somebody brings something to you saying, what am I missing here? Can you talk about collaboration a bit?
Yeah, to some degree I get roped into them, okay, because I love to play games. So I'll be like, in this one, Robert Burke, I met Robert Burke at a small con, and he said, I want to show you this game I'm putting out. And, he was already getting prepared to go on Kickstarter and stuff. He says, Dragons fighting, and I played it, and we got done with it. And I said, yeah, it's fine. It doesn't feel at all like Dragons fighting. All it was set collecting back then. You just laid down some dragons, and depending on what colors they were, you collected your token in the middle, and that was pretty much all there was to it. So he goes, well, what do you have in mind? So I told him a couple of different things. He's like, would you help me with that? So I ultimately helped him with it, and I'm glad I enjoyed working with him on it. It was fun. So I kind of do that if it's a game that I think will be fun to get out, and I have a decent idea for it. I'm glad to help people out with it if I got the time. I'm limited on time. I'm like everybody else. I'm limited on time as to how much I can do that. But we kicked some things back and forth, and I think we came up with a pretty good little combat system toward the end that made the game very interesting. It's more his style game than mine, I'll tell you right now. I tried to add dice, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it, so I had to give that up. So once I gave the dice up, I came up with one that worked, but not near as much fun for me as making those dice roll.
Exactly. Yeah, I've only collaborated a couple times, and my problem is I don't work well with other people. And I don't work well for other people, which is why I've had the kind of crazy career I have. But what I did was, a couple of times it just made sense. Andrew Corson submitted a game, a Mystery Rummy. It was a contest at BGG to come up with a Mystery Rummy game. They asked me to judge. I said, sure, I'll judge. And people would submit their ideas for Mystery Rummy games. And he did one, Escape from Alcatraz. So it didn't win the contest, but I love the theme. He had all this work he did on the escapees and their escape attempts, and it was all there on the cards, and a nice game. It didn't quite feel right for what I was going for with Mystery Rummy at the time, so I said to Andrew, I said, listen, if you'd be willing to do something, if you'd be willing to let me work with the game you have, but give me carte blanche to change it. And I said, I'll be upfront with you. We're not going back and forth on this because I can't do that. I mean, I'm going to decide how this game plays. But if you're okay with me doing that, let's co-design 50-50. Because he did such a beautiful job with the theme. And I've been trying to, figure out what other themes to do with Mystery Rummy. And this was just a perfect one. So he agreed. I did include him. I did talk with him about the things I was doing. I wanted to start off with the worst part of me, so he'd be ready for that. But I did include him, and we talked, and we both had some interesting ideas. So the end product, I think, is better for both of us. The first one, I made Wyatt Earp as a Mystery Rummy. It was supposed to be the next Mystery Rummy in the series, and I bring it to U.S. Games, as I did with all the Mystery Rummies, which they said, we'll produce any Mystery Rummy you do. We'll just do it. So I brought Wyatt Earp. I said, this time I want to be a little different. I got these wanted posters. I got a little wilder thing, a bigger deck going on. I got some money involved. Oh, we can't do it, Mike. All we do are cards in a little box. So I didn't know what to do. Richard Borg is a very good friend of mine, and we're chatting one time, and we played it, and he really liked it. And I said, listen, Richard, who else can I go to? I didn't know any other companies. Wizard of the Coast and U.S. Games. That was it. I really didn't go to the conventions a lot. I didn't have a network yet. Richard had won the Spiel des Jahres with Liar's Dice, and, of course, is a great designer, has been full-time designing for a long time. So he said to me, well, I think I can get this in front of some other companies like Aaliyah and stuff. And as we're working on the game, he made what I think is the best suggestion in the game, which is keeping the money on the Outlaws round to round. I don't know if all play Wyatt Earp, but they clear off in my original design. But by keeping the money on when you don't bring a guy in for the bounty, it made the game what some people would say swingy, but made it fun. It just added all the fun to that. So I said, Richard, that idea, and if you get this sold, let's go 50-50. Because to me, the game wasn't getting published otherwise. He was happy to do it, so we got Aaliyah to do it, then Rio Grande, and now it's being reprinted and out now with Eagle Griffin. So those, but I don't like, I've had a lot of people say, let's do a game together. And it just doesn't work for me like from start. There's something about it. I've got to have a vision and sort of a territory, I think, to do it. And I realize that about myself. Now,
there's a big difference between doing a collaboration and working on a game together. Okay, like Kevin Wilson and I design games together. I design my part, hand it over to him. He does his part. He talks with me some. But, the end result is our interaction was probably minimal as far as, the decisions that we were making in the process. So it's different when you start from scratch and you have to work with somebody. So I'm probably like you on that. I probably don't do that very well.
I certainly don't do well.
Is there a theme or mechanic that maybe not necessarily in your wheelhouse that you've always wanted to design or use?
Oh, I'm going to do superheroes, definitely. I've done several superhero
and you could,
games.
Because that would fit so well in your
Yeah, I've designed probably 12 superhero games. None of them have been published, and I'm definitely going to put out a big superhero adventure game.
Cool.
That's something I absolutely want to do. That's just mine. Okay, so yeah.
I'm trying to do a game without a card in it.
I can help you on that.
Okay. Everything I've done has got cards in it. So my current game it came up, well, should we have a few cards to represent? No cards. I want to show I can do something else. So, or a big board game, which I'm just not. I finally am getting some ideas for. It's just cards were my life from a kid, and it's so natural for me. But I definitely want to do other things. I'm
gonna go out there for Q&A in just a couple of minutes, but I have a few more things for you. What's the biggest tip you could give a brand new designer?
Don't be worried about your failures. Don't be worried about anybody ever stealing a game, losing a game. It's a very honest business overall. But most importantly, remember this: if you can't design more than one game, you're not really a game designer. So if that first one doesn't go, if people don't like it, design another one. That's the key. You've got to have more than one idea, and just make sure you nourish those ideas and be as productive as you can.
For me, it's the best advice I can give is stay with your initial vision of the game, especially new time designers with early play, and I wouldn't play test too early, let's put it that way, but a lot of people bring me something that's obviously not completed yet. So I'm making comments. I'm designing the game. I say, well, maybe the ending should be this or Don't listen to people like me. Don't do that, because you're going to get conflicting ideas. You're getting my idea as a designer. Then you'll go to talk to somebody else. A funny story, a kid I know, a friend, who is Gary here? Yeah, I guess not here, but he'll be here, I think, this weekend. He's got a really fun game. He calls it Dungeon Shopper right now, right? So shopping, it was first going to the store and shopping game, putting stuff in your shopping cart. Really imaginative, nice game. So I would give him suggestions on simplifying it. Then he played with Andy Parks, great designer, Core Worlds, and he's in our game group up in New Jersey, and lots of good things. He does the Star Trek Attack Wing stuff for WizKids. Really good guy. So he gives them ideas to complicate it, because that's where Andy comes from. And so he's, I don't know what to do. You guys, and I said, Gary, you do what's your vision of the game? At least know where you want the game to sit. Because then when the playtesters give you comments and stuff, you can have an idea.
And that's great advice. The other piece of that is that you said right at the very beginning, your game must be finished before you start showing it to people. I can't tell you how many times I've been with a publisher and somebody's brought up a game and it's not really finished, and they've started showing them, they're like, well, I'm not done with it, but it's going to do something like this. They can't make any judgments off of that, okay? And that's going to probably be disappointing for you, because they're not, all excited about it. So if it's not finished, if it's not polished, I would never, you're only going to get one opportunity in front of a lot of these publishers if you're first time. Make sure it's finished and published and what you want it to be, because if not, you're probably not going to get a good result.
So I'm going to ask for maybe some scoops here. So Mike, you were talking about Mr. Rummy a lot. Are we going to see some reprints?
Oh, they're all reprinted. They're Kickstarter people are getting them now, right, Ralph? And
are we going to see any future Mystery Rummies?
Oh, future Mystery Rummies. I do have some ideas for changing the series up a little bit. I'm not interested in doing another one exactly like the 5. I think 5 is a nice number for that original series, but I do have certainly a take on the same idea, but opening up it to more storytelling, sort of interesting area. So anyway, yes, but you'll see something along that.
Now, Richard, Defenders of the Last Stand?
Defenders of the Last Stand, yes. That's probably my newest. That it kind of works off of the Defenders engine, but it's kind of Defenders and Arkham and everything else I've ever done blended together in a futuristic post-apocalyptic world. You have to adventure. You can scavenge for ancient ruins and get items that help you. My favorite item is a black velvet painting of Elvis, which is clearly an ancient god. Once again, your last stand is the city, the only city where humanity is. You're trying to defend it from the raiders that are coming in. And there's more than one way to win now. You can win by actually building a cargo plane and escaping before they get to the city. So it's got a lot of different things in it. So I think it's going to be a good addition to the Defenders line.
Solid. All right, so let's get some Q&A going. I'm going to steal this one, if you don't mind.
We'll share.
Yeah. Get Paul.
Okay, so I'm going to open by saying you're not allowed to say, I love all my children equally, okay? Name a published game of yours that is an ugly baby, and tell us what you learned after that game got published.
There's so many. You want to go first?
Go ahead.
For me, there have been so many games I made because I was told to make them. And some of them just, as much as I tried, they just didn't work for what I was hoping. And these are the area of games that a lot of them I have forgotten. But there's a couple that I remember.
You can remember.
Yeah, and every statement, they still sell a couple copies. I don't know why. I don't remember the name of one of them. It's U.S. Games. It's a card game about elections. So it's like, I don't know whether it's president something or what it is. I forget. But yeah, it just didn't work. I mean, it's a light little family game. It had little votes you added in. You had all the presidents, and they had interesting facts in the cards. That's what U.S. Games had to offer, right? And they said, make a game out of this. So I tried. It's not one I usually mention that I did. The other one that's funny, I mean, I don't think the game is terrible, but it's a funny story. Charlie Brown Plays Baseball was my first baseball game that I tried. But this is because U.S. Games said we have the Peanuts license and we need a card game, with Charlie Brown featured, and they've got a bunch of pictures of him playing baseball in comic strips they'll let us use, so can you make a card game? But it's got to be a standard deck of 52 cards, and it will have the actual regular card symbols on them. So I did it. It's closest to Harry's Grand Slam baseball, but not as good. I mean, you play the card, it has a home run on it or a single or whatever, and you can counter it, that kind of thing. The funny thing about it is when it was in stores, the regular deck of cards with no game outsold Charlie Brown Plays Baseball, which is a regular deck of cards with in it a baseball game 50-1. It outsold it. So that, I don't know whether that tells us something or not. Maybe you can't put more than one thing in the same thing. But, that is, again, they're all my ugly babies would be in this. I was told to do it. And I thought it'd be a fun challenge. But in the end, a lot of them didn't work.
Stick with that excuse. Yes. Okay. I'm going to go with Pirates versus Dinosaurs. Now, it's not a bad game. In fact, it's a good game. But it's one of the earlier ones that somebody took to Kickstarter. And the game was originally designed for 4 players. When the publisher got it, the publisher said, we need a 5-player in this game. So we altered it to 5 players. Then, when they put it on Kickstarter, they said, if we get so much money, we're going to add a 6th player. Well, the problem with this game is it takes so long for your turns that a 6th player is as close to hell as you're ever going to get. You play that game with 3 players, and it is a blast. You play it with 4, and it's pretty dadgum good. You play it with 5, and you're starting to go out and get lunch, between turns. And if you play it with 6, you will hate me, and it's one that can just run away, and all this stuff can sound like a good idea, and the question can come, can you make it so it works with 6? Yeah, we can alter the board, we can alter the cards, we can do this, but in the end, you end up with something that's not what it's intended to be. So.
Hey there. So you mentioned earlier 2 terms, the term hobby market and mass market. I wanted to know, what kind of games do you guys prefer to make? Like, which market do you target? Which market do you prefer? And in your opinion, is there room in the middle? Is there a lot of leeway, or not really?
I think most all my games fall in the middle. We call them crack games. Mike Gray from Hasbro called my games that when I first showed. I did Mystery Rummy Clue for Hasbro. They were trying to find a Clue card game. And I submitted it, and they loved it. Rob Davio was there, people I still know up there when I play tested with, and they loved the game. But Winning Moves is Ron Phil is a former Hasbro guy, and he had made a really good Clue card game, and they chose that over this. So, but anyway, that was my experience where Mike Gray said, this is great, but it's a crack game. What a crack means, it's in between the hobby market and the mass market. So the risk is you miss both. A little too complicated for the mass, and not quite interesting enough in complexity for the hobby. I design games that I think are fun and that I want to play, and over years, of course, I've started to think a little bit more about this, but it does not influence my game design. So I'm still probably doing games in the crack. Certainly Diamonds, my most recent one before baseball came out, is oriented towards mass, but I certainly wanted it to be playable in hobby and hope it gets to mass. Mass is a whole different ballgame. It's got to be so accessible, and the kind of games we make, if they're going to experience that, we're going to have hobby gamers probably expose the people in their families to the game. So for me, I'm somewhere in the middle, but I don't really think about it when I design.
I'm the same way. I think if you're thinking about mass market versus hobby industry, then you're more of a publisher than a designer, probably. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't think mass market, but realistically, I think the statement you use, the same one I'm going to use. I design games I want to play, and that's my passion, and that's what I'm going to design, and that's what's going to come out good. Shoot, who wouldn't want a mass market hit? That would be fantastic. But I think you have to design a game that you really want to play. And then you're going to have to, find a company that's willing to publish that. And look, I guess probably Pandemic's probably the one that's biggest mass market I can think of outside of, Magic and things like that that works in hobby industry and mass market both. But I don't think when he sat down to design that game, he was thinking, I want to do something that works mass market and hobby industry. I think he just designed a game he had a great idea for, and it just happened to, catch fire.
Come on, these guys are great. Somebody else has to have a question for him.
Well, I'll add another thought to that, though. You cannot go into it saying, I want to make the next Ticket to Ride, because the Ticket to Ride has been made. So I don't think you get any benefit from looking back and saying, I want to create a game that has that does what that game did. And so that's the further underscoring why we don't occupy ourselves forever. Oh, yeah, this has that perfect Ticket to Ride weight, whatever that is. I mean, that's all I had.
Is there anything a publisher could do that would make you say, I don't want to give my game to you?
Commit treason? That's such a broad question. I mean, first of all, you know the publishers that you're going to. So you know what the reputation is, you know how they do business, and if you're going to do business with somebody who is going to do something so bad that you wouldn't want them to have your game, I wouldn't pitch it to them to start with. So it's kind of a hard one to answer, but the end result is I've found everybody I've dealt with in this industry to be good, respectable people. So I mean, I think it's a fantastic industry. We're not overly secretive. We're a little bit secretive at times. I'm probably the least secretive person you're going to bump into. But essentially, it's an industry that's like a community to some extent. The hobby industry is. So you're not going to really. I don't think you're going to bump into anybody that's going to do something so bad that you'd say, well, I wouldn't give them to. I mean, the question would be, are they going to publish your game? Okay. Are they going to write a contract for it, and is it actually going to come out, or is the contract going to run out before it comes out? Because that's probably one of the biggest risks you take when you sign on with a company is a game can just get slid back. I mean, I've got a Knights of the Round Table game with Z-Man. It's an excellent game. Zev really loves it, but right after we signed the contract for it, Zev's company got bought, and he's not making the decision as to which getting published. And even though they want to publish it, it's now set for almost 2.5 years, which means the contract will run out very, very soon. And when a game sets for a period of time and then the contract runs out on it, a lot of times that game's not viable for the market anymore, because guess what? We move so far on what the public wants. They want faster games, or they want longer games, or they want quicker games, or they want smaller games. Okay, look at the Epic sales. How small can we make it? And everybody want it. So it's just a shifting market, and time makes a big difference. And that would be the biggest question I would have when I was signing with somebody is, will they actually put it out? So.
Yeah, I think there's an important issue that this brings up, especially for young designers, but for all of us. I mean, I've been in two different fields that deal with contracts. In radio, that was the real hub of it. I had an attorney who looked over my contracts, and each time they were negotiated, there were big, it was pretty hefty money in New York City, right? Well, the game industry is very different. So we're not talking, nobody's usually going to make a lot of, millions on a game, but I have found that different companies give you very different contracts. And sometimes I'm confused. I look at it and I say, what does this mean? Like there'll be no date that the game has to be published by. So that's a little flag, right? There'll be no date it ever comes back to you. Well, I like to have something that says when we stop selling it and we haven't sold it for X amount of time, that we then turn it back to you. That'd be nice. Yeah.
I would never sign a contract that at the end of the contract the game doesn't return back to me. At some point, it's coming back to me. For example, if Arkham Horror, when I signed with Chaosium after the contract ended, didn't come back to me, I could have never signed it with Fantasy Flight. So, if you create something, there are companies that want to keep it. I would never sign a contract that lets them keep that property.
So I think, whether you have an attorney to do negotiating for you, or what I did, I just took the game contracts to the same guy who's using radio, and I say, listen, do me a favor, just read this over, And I remember with the first Pokemon one, he said, oh, I'm not just reading this over, I'm calling them. Because there are issues here that he just wanted clarified. Now, Pokemon's a big company, and it was a fine contract, but there were some issues that he was, wondering about. Others, he'll say, wait a minute, you can't sign this, and it usually isn't the royalty percentage rate. Sometimes it's how they compute it. There's probably a list of 10 bullet points that anybody who's about to get a game published should be aware of in the contract. So I think that's kind of important because we're doing this for love and passion, and we don't want to hassle over a lot of stuff, right? But as creators and inventors and artists, we should protect ourselves. It isn't as bad as the early days of music when guys would write songs and never get a penny for them. But game designers do not make a lot of money on the games. In Europe, there's a game designer union. There are several designers like Michael Schott and some others who are very outspoken about this subject. So read some of the things they say, and just be aware. This is it's a good piece of advice. Just sort of, and it's more as Richard said, it's more about, is that going to get published? Is it going to come back to you? It's more than just the percentage rate. Although you would like to know where that percentage rate is calculated from. Is it from everything they get? Is it after all their expenses? And all of a sudden, there's no profit left on that game. What's the percentage of? That kind of stuff. So, that's something I would certainly look at.
I've got more of a more of a personal question for you guys. It's things are obviously a lot different now with Kickstarter and new designers, and when you get a game out there, you've got to go out and you've got to pretty much sell to the masses yourself as well as the companies, and if you're trying to get it published. How have you guys been as far as when you get a game signed and they're going to publish it? How do you guys feel about going out and being your own advertising and playing the games? Because we see Richard all the time. I mean, we played Run, Fight, or Die at Gen Con, and Mike, you were playing baseball highlights. Like, how do you guys feel that way? Would you rather not have to do that and let the companies do it? Or how do you feel about the advertising part?
Well, for me, I design my games to play, so I'll play them any day. Right now, you break out one of my games, we'll go right now.
That's exactly what I would say. That's why I'm doing this, so I can play this game. I made the game so I can play it. Let's play. That's what it's at.
We got some. Sorry.
All right, one more. So I wanted to know, obviously you guys have made tons of games. At what point do you begin to worry about intellectual property and protecting your ideas? Personally, I know in our experience, we've had a little trouble navigating how the law protects games or really whether or not it's worth it, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I was involved in the biggest IP lawsuit in gaming. So I think about right now I can start to talk about it, maybe, although the participants and I discuss it sometimes, and we, like Luke Peterschmidt once told me, gee, someday we could probably talk about it. So I'm not going to be entirely specific, but I can answer your question. Let's put it that way. Number one, the mechanics of your game have no protection. They never will have any protection. Now, there is a patent in place for Magic the Gathering that involves playing games with a bunch of cards, but as far as I know, it's unenforceable. I don't think anybody... I agree. I don't think anybody's been successfully... It was important to them at the time, and they used to send... I know U.S. Games got the bill saying, by the way, you made a trading card game, here's what you owe us. But they never paid, and it was never followed up on. So I will tell you this: the important thing in game design, I did a game for a certain company to look at, and I showed it to them. And they said, oh, this is nice, but we're taking in, we have like 8 more versions to look at, but it's nice. And I said, would you like to pay me a hold fee? Now, what a hold fee is a certain amount of money to say that for 3 months we'll keep the game. You can't show it to anybody else. And then at the end of the 3 months, if we take the game, we'll make some deal, hopefully we both like, or if we're not going to take it, we'll give you back the game. And we're out the $1,000 or whatever the hold money was. They said, no, we're not going to do that. It's a nice game, but there's lots of other games coming in. And who else is going to do this themed game? Some of you may figure out what it is before the end of the conversation, but I'm not going to tell you up front. So anyway, that night, this is how crazy this business is. That night I go home and I get a phone call from the head of R&D at another big game company. And they said, Mike, we just heard that you showed a such and such game to such and such today. Is there any paper on it? Meaning, is there a hold or is there some agreement? I said, no, they've got other things coming in. Well, we just signed a deal with such and such company that demanded we make the same themed game within 3 months. We don't have any game like it. We don't know, and we hear now you've done it, so can we fly you out to see us tomorrow, and can we look at it? So I said, okay. So I went out there, and they put me in a room, and it's right out of these movies, right? They put me in a room, and they said, we won't let you leave this room until you say it's our game. So they put an amount of money on the blackboard. This is what we'd like to pay you to make sure we get this game. Then you go and you call this other company, explain to them that you've sold to us. And I was shocked. It was a lot of money. I was shocked. They thought, I think, that I was disappointed or something because he erased the number and doubled it. And I felt like I was in a story because it's never happened since. I felt like I was in a movie, in a bad movie in a way. But I was happy to see the number. So I said, "Oh, let's stop right there. Let's not go any. Okay, this is fine." So now that payment was for the entire rights to the game. That was a buyout. There was no royalty or anything else. They own it completely, lock, stock, and barrel. Which for what the kind of game it was fine. It wasn't. I knew it was not going to have a life after the buzz of the thing. So I called back the other company. I said, by the way, guys, I just sold it. You cannot use it. They have the game, right? I said, you can't use anything in that game because it's intellectual property owned by me until the game is published. Okay? So, and I even added, I said, whatever you do, don't use this mechanic. There's one mechanic in the game that's quite original, and that's, really makes the game unique for the type of game it is. So they said, oh, fine, we got all these other designs, we'll be fine. So that summer, in one of the trade magazines, they advertised their game, and Luke Peter Schmidt calls me up and says, Mike, isn't this your game? And, of course, Luke's with the company that's making the game. So I looked at the ad, and I said, that's my game. So the next call was from an attorney who said, Mike, would you allow us to sue this other company on behalf of you? And I said, well, this other company is so-and-so. They're huge. They're a big company. How do you do that? He said, no, Mike, we're who we are, and I didn't know exactly who was running things at the time. We're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So I said, oh, okay. So I said, okay. So they went through a deposition. Now, here's some tips for you. And this will never happen, probably, to anybody here. It was just a fluke that happened to me. But I'm sitting in a deposition. I had Franklin Planner at the time. This is how long ago this was. And I write everything down. I had playtester notes for the dates and things that when I sort of made the improvements in the game and how the game developed. And I had mailed myself the rules. With a postmarked envelope that had never been opened the week before I showed it to that first company. Because what they were saying was the entire idea was one of their employees and had nothing to do with me. And so I went to the deposition, showed all this stuff. The attorney just looked at it and looked at the guy who had said it was all his ideas, who looked a little sheepish, and basically the guy just said to me and the company, said, what do you guys want? So we made a deal. But without all that stuff, I don't know that would have happened. So, not that we should be paranoid. As Richard said, it's a wonderful industry. Part of this story is a company that isn't in the game industry, right? I think if everybody involved had been in the game industry, it would have been very different. So, but I would just say, understand that once a game is published, anybody can do anything. If that company had waited for the game to be published, they could have brought their game out. And even though it was the same game as mine, nothing I could have done about it.
The one thing, and I hear this every time I'm on a panel, I get this asked every time, and I really feel that young game designers or new game designers are spending a lot more time worrying about this than I think they need to. If you want to protect yourself, my advice is do exactly what he did, and I used to do it on some of my stuff. Mail yourself a copy of the game, registered mail, don't open it, it's dated. If you run into a problem, you've got that to open up. That's about your best protection. Truth of the matter is, if you go around suing people in this industry, it's a tight industry, you're probably not going to have people look at your games in the future. Second thing, as I said earlier, look, if somebody steals one of my games, I'm not going to be happy about it, but I'm just going to go make another game. So, I'd rather focus my energies that way. But if you want to protect yourself, I went to a lawyer when I was young, starting out, and what they told me to do was mail yourself this registered letter, and at least you've got that to lean back on, and that's pretty powerful. But realistically, you can't protect the mechanics. Games can utilize those mechanics, and it can look virtually like your game in a different theme, and there's really not much you're going to be able to do about that.
All right, let's get maybe one or two more, or there we go. Oh, now I've got 1 million.
After you've designed a game, showed it to a publisher, gotten it signed, how much involvement do you have in the development of that game going forward typically?
It really depends on the publisher. For example, with Fantasy Flight, if somebody's doing development like Kevin and working, I'll have some conversations with them, but for the most part, once I get handed over to them, I'm done with it. When I start doing expansions, I just send them to them and say, if you want to put these out in the future, here they are, and that's the involvement. With some of the smaller companies, it can be much more involved, especially if they go Kickstarter, which you guys spent the last 2 hours today or 3 hours talking about Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is the designer's bane, to be honest with you, because your project is never done when it goes on Kickstarter. You're going to have to design bonus items. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to do that. And if you are, I'm very serious that I don't want to just throw things in my game. I want them to be of value. So that means that's a lot of time that I've got to go back, put in a game that I may have designed a year and a half, ago, and I've got to go get back very familiar with it and get into it and do that. I'm happy for the publishers who are getting money to go publish, but from a designer's perspective, it's kind of a pain for us.
Again, as Richard says, completely dependent on the publisher. So when I worked for Wizard of the Coast, I would give them a trading card game. In 3 months, it would come out, and maybe they asked me a question or two. But in a lot of ways, it'd be a different game. They had the most talent. They had a huge talented staff. When I did Baseball Highlights, Ralph and I, having known each other so well, we really continued to work on it. It's like I never stopped working on it. Once they signed it, we said, let's just make sure it's the best it can be, and we kept on perfecting it and playing it, and both of us working very hard. Other companies that don't have development teams, you're just handing it over, and you better make sure it's right because they're going to print it. And so again, very different depending on the company.
So you guys have huge hits, but what's really impressive is your longevity in the industry. How do you prevent burnout and move past it when it does happen?
It's kind of like if you were a baseball player that could play baseball forever and not get old, you probably would because you just love it. And that's the way it is for me. I mean, and I wholeheartedly agree that if you ever start to get burned out, all you have to do is sit down and play a few games, and you will be fired up again, whether they're your games or somebody else's games. Or you get with some people, and you're laughing and you're having fun, and you start telling yourself, what a wonderfully fun thing I get to do. And the fact that people are paying me to do it is fantastic. That's my perspective.
Yes, this is the most joyful thing I do in my life and ever have. And I've been a gamer since I was very young. So for me, it's always been the number one passion of my life. And it was really fun to reach a point where now this is what I can do full time. So for me, I can't ever imagine it burning out.
All right, we got one more, and then we'll wrap it up.
You've both mentioned you go and play games a lot. What are some of your go-to games right now that y'all go play?
Are you talking about our own games? We play a lot. I mean, when I play new games, it usually is something that's just come out. So whatever's just come out, sometimes I'll play that to see, okay, what kind of mechanics do they put in here? What's changing? What's so popular now? But basically, when we go and we're at a convention or something like that, and they want to play one of ours, whatever they want to play, I'm in for it. So if I've designed it, if they want to play it, then I want to sit down and have a good time playing it with them. And it's so easy to do because there's it's nice when you get to play with some fans of your games because that's why you created it to start with.
I do have a passion to play of other people's games, and I do have a list of favorites. So for me, there are certainly go-to games. and they change, right? Because we go through phases with a game, and a lot of the games I'll play like crazy for a couple months, and then there's something new, but the good ones will stay on that shelf and be. So Impulse by Carl Chuddik, I don't know if if anybody is familiar, is probably my favorite game right now, and it's been a couple years now that I've been playing it. I'm a Carl Chuddik fan, so Glory to Rome is also up there for me. Innovation is up there for me. I love Ticket to Ride. I love Kanban, and I don't know why, except that's I just love how the theme works. It's a heavy Euro game, and I usually hate those. But Kanban is so much theme in it. You got this boss running around who's going to evaluate you, and having never worked for anybody in my life, really, I never had to sort of go to an office and listen
That's
to people.
why you like it.
It must be, because my friends keep saying, no, I don't want to play that. It's too much like work. And I said, well, I never did this stuff. I never went to meetings and did. So for me, it's fun, But there's so many. Deus, boy, if you haven't played Deus yet, play it. And I brought it. I'd be happy to play with anybody. Orleans. We're in a period where there's some really, really strong games coming out, especially in the light to medium Euro area, and occasionally hard. And of course, there are a lot of my own games that it reaches a point where I play them and I don't even realize they're mine, because they've now become a game that I choose to play. You know what I mean? So it's not like I'm playing a game I did. I don't remember the design process when I'm in the middle of trying to win the game. But yes, I play so many games. I'm crazy about it, and I just really happy that this is a renaissance we're in, and there's so many great games.
Richard, did you have
play.
one game that was not your own that you could say was your favorite right now?
Well, I play all kinds of thematic games. So, really, you could pick almost whatever thematic game recently has come out. I love Thunder Alley because I'm a big NASCAR fan. I'm a huge fan of that game, and every time I can try to get it to the tables. I played Guardian Chronicles the last couple of weeks, which I think the French did a fantastic job with that one. Sentinels of the Multiverse is a regular game that we break out because it's always highly playable. But I have a gaming night every Tuesday, and it usually involves some play testing. But the people who come to that are kind of like connoisseurs of games, so they constantly bring different games. Okay, so whatever is the newest, hottest thing usually comes out and hits the table at that point.
Now, will you guys be at any conventions this year? Any other conventions that we can find you guys at?
I'm going to be at Dice Tower Con. I'm going to be at Gnome Con down in Savannah. I'm going to be at Origins. Not sure I'm going to make Gen Con this year because they moved it, and now it bumps up with Beach Week where my kids and grandkids come in. So kids, grandkids, beach versus Gen Con loses.
I agree.
I'm going to be going to Comic Con in Houston. I've got several things lined up. Going to go to Gamma this year. I usually don't do that. So
yeah, I used to be at that years ago. Yeah, I'll be at the Gathering of Friends. That's an invitation, but I see some people I think that I see there, and then. I'll probably make Origins. Going to be a lot of baseball stuff and Diamond stuff there, so I think I will do Origins. I won't do Gen Con. Gen Con's an every other year thing, I think, unless I have something new coming out, and I've got a lot going on this summer. I'm going to move to Denver, among other things, so I got to coordinate that. I'll be at Dice Tower Con. I'll be at BGG Con. Yes, we'll be there together. I'll be at BGG.con, which has become my favorite. I mean, what a convention that is. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Richard, are we ever going to see you on Twitter?
No.
I'm not on Twitter yet either.
I was going to ask you too.
Are
Michael.
we missing something? Should we be on Twitter?
I don't know. Then we'd be doing this all the time.
I know. We wouldn't be designing games.
If you make games, you can't be doing this all the time.
That's right.
So we just have to follow your exploits on BGG.
Exactly.
That's right.
Just corners. We'll talk about anything.
Oh, yes.
Well, thank you guys so much, so very much. I really
Thank you.
It could be. Thank you guys.